section, it's only 3, has to do with this use of the media that you've just spoken about. It's been very interesting in yesterday's events to see that so much of the media was or the internet, was shut down in advance, and quite a bit in advance, I think, this time around. So it seems on the one hand that the government is getting a bit more savvy about how to attack the websites and bring down the networks. Will the people in Iran always be able to stay ahead of that by one step? How worried are you about the government catching up on this idea of the use of media and really shutting things down further and much further in advance, the next time around? Thanks.
Shadi?
Yeah. Fortunately, I was in the same panel that Shirin Ebadi was, and so I can transfer her discussion, her arguments, and also I can add mine to that. Like her, I defend and I agree with the political sanctions, especially regarding the human rights violation. The problem, as Dr. Payam Akhavan said before, is there are a lot of sanctions about the nuclear issues, but there is no specific sanction about the human rights. The things that Shirin Ebadi and I think all of human rights activists, all of Iranian human rights activists defend is it is the time that the necessity of some specific guarantees to stop violation of rights in Iran, and the political sanction is one of the most important of them. For example, as Dr. Akhavan said before, we are expecting the European Union countries as well as the USA country make some travel ban for who violates human rights, for who are accusing for violation of the rights, and the people who very well known like Saeed Mortazavi, but there is no sanction against them. There is no action against them. There is no political approach to them, and also there are a lot of well-known human rights abusers that you can simply find them in the documents which were published by the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center. There are a lot of photos and names there, but all of them are free to travel to the USA, to the European countries, to open their bank accounts there, to invest their monies there. So that's why all of us defend the political sanctions against, especially against some specific persons who are accusing for human rights. And regarding to using the European and American states courts, I know there are very obstacles in for adopting this strategy, but as I know that some of the countries, at least 10 European countries, accepted the universal jurisdiction principle, which allows their judicial system to accuse, to pursue, and to have a trial for a person who committed a crime, who are accusing for crime against humanity. And there are a lot of examples that, for example, in the Switzerland, in Geneva, there are a lot of examples of trials of human rights abusers in Rwanda or Sudan or the other countries, but there is no example from Iranian human rights abuser. And regarding the website, yeah, I think as you mentioned, the government is very concerned about the internet and the internet as a main tool of the green movement. So that's why they focus on the internet, banning the websites and even the Google Mail or some of the Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, but I think one of the most important actions that should be adopted by the Western countries is supporting the ideas and the projects which improve using freely internet for Iranian audience, for Iranian users, and I defend such projects, and I think such projects is so important for the movement to move forward.
Maybe I will take the same questions in reverse order. I think that there is an extraordinary level of sophistication among the young Iranians in accessing the internet, and their ingenuity in getting around filters has been quite extraordinary. And I think that to say what the bottom line is, the regime can slow down the access to information and process of transformation, but they cannot stop it. And really what we're dealing with is a kind of democratic tidal wave. It's a seismic shift, and 70% of Iranians are under 30 years of age and under. And this is a generation which is overwhelmingly post-ideological. They're no longer satisfied with revolutionary slogans. They want economic opportunities. They want cultural openness. And none of those opportunities are being afforded to them, which is why you have the millions of people pouring out into the streets. Not all of those people are hardcore activists. Many of them are simply unemployed. Many of them are just angry. They're desperate. They don't understand why in a country with such tremendous wealth they have to live such miserable lives. They're angry at corruption. In that context, restricting access to internet can impede, but not in any serious way undermine the sort of overall impact of this shift and transformation. With respect to universal jurisdiction, as Shadi said, there are a number of countries which have this sort of legislation. We have it in Canada under a Crimes Against Humanity Act. The problem is that in most cases, to exercise universal jurisdiction, you need the presence of the accused on your territory. Countries like Belgium and Spain have what we call in absentia universal jurisdiction, where you issue an indictment against someone who is not actually present on your territory. And given the fact that there's no other connection with your country, the victims are not your nationals, the perpetrators are not your nationals, it didn't occur on your territory, then it becomes largely of symbolic value, because it's unlikely that that person is going to end up coming to your country. So these are some of the problems that are associated with universal jurisdiction, and it would be up to domestic institutions to investigate who's on their territory in order to realistically eventually arrest someone. And all it takes is one or two prosecutions of those abroad to send a message that there will be no safe haven for those who've been responsible for these crimes. The question of political sanctions, I think, is extremely important. It's extremely important at two levels. One is that we don't want sanctions that punish the Iranian people. We want sanctions that punish the individuals that are responsible for these atrocities. So let's say that there is a sanction on imports of gasoline or whatever the case may be. What happens is the black market price is going to triple. Who controls that sector of the economy? It's probably companies that are under the control of the Revolutionary Guards. So that will only enhance their profitability and put more money in their coffers, which they then use to enhance their apparatus. So what we need are smart sanctions, intelligent sanctions, which understand that there are kind of two Irans. There's the Iran of the hardliners, which are an increasingly isolated, dwindling minority, And then there's the Iran of the masses that wants an open culture with human rights and democracy. Now, in terms of what actually has impact, I think we have to understand the importance of symbolic support in the current context. There is really a war of nerves in Iran now. And much of what we see in the streets is symbolic protest. So when people wear green, and now the color green has become a political issue. There's a famous photograph of President Ahmadinejad with a flag of Iran behind him, and the green has been transformed into blue now because merely showing the green color has become a kind of political statement. And that's a remarkable success on the part of this movement, because green is part of the Iranian flag, and it has a very special symbol in Islam. Or the fact that many people are chanting Allahu Akbar, God is great, as a protest chant is very interesting. I have a friend who's Armenian Christian, who's chanting Allahu Akbar. And the point is that when the Basij, who are supposed to be devout Muslims, are beating people for chanting Allahu Akbar, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance, a kind of contradiction, which makes it very difficult. When we see these thousands of emails being sent out with photographs of Basij militia that are beating people, together with their home addresses and telephone numbers. So this is all part of a campaign of, in effect, psychological warfare by the democratic opposition and by the regime. What the people in Iran need to know is that the international community stands in solidarity with them. They need to know that if tomorrow President Ahmadinejad makes some sort of concession on uranium enrichment, the international community isn't going to turn around and completely turn a blind eye to human rights abuses. The one issue that the regime has in order to legitimize itself is the nuclear issue. And the Iranian masses still see the nuclear issue through the prism of Iran's right to civilian nuclear energy. And they have pride in their technological advancement. This is the way it has been presented to them. And one sees why Ahmadinejad has skillfully used this issue again and again to provoke nationalist sentiments and to rally the masses behind him. The one area where the international community and the Iranian majority are partners is in relation to human rights abuses. If the international community starts saying that we are concerned with the human rights of Iranians, with their democratic rights, then the alliance is one of the majority of Iranians and the international community. And the nuclear issue fades into the background. And as I said, the nuclear issue, I think, will, in a sense, solve itself when the nature of the regime changes, when we have a regime whose legitimacy doesn't rest on militarization, but which has a democratic mandate, which spends its resources on bettering the lives of its people. And I'll just end by saying one last thing. It was telling that on the Quds Day protests some time ago, when the regime supporters were chanting "Death to America," the crowds were chanting back "Death to Russia," which is very interesting because people are saying we don't care about America anymore. We care about Russia, which is playing the role of the imperial power by propping up a regime which doesn't represent the democratic will. Or then when there are chants of death to Israel, people chanting "Neither Gaza nor Lebanon, my life is only for Iran." People are tired of hate-mongering and militarization. They don't care about having their money sent to Hamas or Hezbollah when there is incredible unemployment and poverty in their own midst. And that's why human rights isn't just a lofty moral issue, but it also makes pragmatic sense at the level of regional stability.
Yes, please. Oh, thank you.
I just don't know what that lady meant with political sanctions on Iran, and if you can explain a little bit more about that. And then if it is what I understand, then I say why I am against that.
Well, maybe you can explain what you meant by political sanctions. Oh, I see.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, Shadi, can you address that?
Yeah, regarding political sanction, I mean some specific political restrictions against not only human rights abusers, I think against the the activities of Iranian government in the foreign country. I just repeat the example that Shirin Ebadi today raised. She mentioned, she talked about the national orchestra, the national music group, which in the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution have had a tour amongst in European countries, and the European countries did issue visa for the group, and did provide the support and the facilities to work in the situation that the real musical and artists, musical group and music groups and artists and real band are not allowed to work in Iran. We have faced another show in European countries. So that's why we defend that because, Iranian regime always want to pretend everything is okay, everything is normal, everything is going on. So we need some strong strategies that shows that nothing is normal, nothing is going on, and something will happen in the country. But sometimes it seems that, as Dr. Akhavan said, that the only things that European countries and the USA and the Western countries generally are concerned about Iran is the nuclear issue. So there are a lot of ideas and ideas amongst Iranian intellectuals, activists about the political sanctions. We can write a list of suggestions to European countries or Western countries, but the main point is adopting some powerful and some strong actions against the governments which is totally don't respect human rights.
Did you want to respond?
Okay, then I understood something else, and especially that you spoke about this indictment against some of these leaders of Islamic Republic, universal jurisdiction and things like that. Personally, I know only one person who was indicted, that was Bashir from Sudan, and it just made everything more complicated in negotiation with this guy. That's my perspective and my opinion. I just say that isolating this regime and people of the leaders of regime makes everything worse for people of Iran, and I'm against that. I am for engagement. It doesn't matter who. I mean, even in this country, you have people you can get to the court for all crimes they've done. I don't want to name people's name. Some of them used to be president of this country. Okay, but you don't do that. Ahmadinejad is also one of them. Why shouldn't we engage with these people somehow? Just to give them some incentive to leave, not to stay more. When you say to a person, I'm going to punish you badly, believe me, he's going to fight until the end. And these people are not like former regime. They don't have anywhere to go. They have money, I agree, but they cannot go to south of France like people from the former regime. With all respect, if somebody is here, I don't know. But they left, and they have good life wherever they are. Okay, I respect that. It's none of my business. But these people have nowhere to go. Just imagine that. When you give them that kind of threat that we are going to punish you, believe me, they stay forever, and they will fight until the end, because they know the perspective, what's going to happen to them. So I have a new suggestion, a new just option. Why don't you give them a blanket amnesty? You just leave Iran, leave us in peace, and we let you go with your money. What about that?
Well, if it works, let's try it. I don't think it will work. And the point, well, I mean, this is the experience of Iran. I can tell you about the experience of many other countries. Former Yugoslavia is a case in point. When Slobodan Milosevic was in power and the UN War Crimes Tribunal indicted him, many people made the exact same argument, that you're only going to prolong the war. You need to give him an incentive to end the war, to end the ethnic cleansing, and even if he's committed crimes against humanity and all these massive atrocities, let's sweep everything under the carpet, let's forget about it, and we will then have peace. It ended up being a totally unrealistic approach for a number of reasons. For one thing, whether there was an indictment or not was not going to make a crucial difference to whether Slobodan Milosevic stayed in power. And the situation was such that it was impossible to have any peace or stability so long as those with extremist and violent political ideologies were in a position of power. I can tell you that when the UN peacekeepers were sent to Bosnia-Herzegovina, there were 60,000 NATO troops under the International Stabilization Force. They refused at first to arrest the war criminals because they were afraid of a Somalia-type situation like in Mogadishu. They said, we need to be neutral, we can't get entangled in all this. And of course, the people at NATO and the Western capitals also said, you know, the War Crimes Tribunal is a nice symbolic gesture, but we need to negotiate with these people. At the end of the day, those same peacekeepers on the ground came to our court and said that these people are destabilizing the situation. Whenever we create disengagement, confidence building, they're inciting violence and hatred because that's their instrument of power. How can we get rid of them? And it ended up that many of those people had been indicted by the War Crimes Tribunal. So ultimately, it was the peacekeepers on the ground that wanted these people to be removed from political power. And I think that there are many studies which show that Bosnia-Herzegovina is a far more stable place today because Radovan Karadzic was removed from political power. Slobodan Milosevic is an interesting case in point as well. The NATO bombs did not discharge him during the Kosovo campaign, massive bombardment of Yugoslavia. And if anything, it made him more popular. But when he was indicted, even though the regime turned him into a martyr and for some moment he became a hero, what happened within the power structure of Yugoslavia is that all of his political rivals, this is also happening in Sudan with Omar al-Bashir, all the political rivals began to sense that this person has an expiry date. This person cannot continue to be a head of state because he does not enjoy international legitimacy. Even Mr. al-Bashir, who escalated the violence in the Darfur, basically to show that he could exact a higher cost, today he is being increasingly isolated within Sudan. All of his political opponents are using actually the fact that he cannot travel to any member states of the International Criminal Court. He went to Turkey, went to Ethiopia just to defy the international community. But in the long run, the cost of political isolation begins to set in. But as I said, I agree entirely with you that we do not want a culture of vengeance. We do not want to send a message that we're going to punish each and every person that has ever committed any crime. One needs a more nuanced approach of saying that those who are most responsible have to be prosecuted, to make it a rule from now on that political power is not a license for murder, rape, and torture. If we don't do that, then we're only going to repeat the same pattern of abuse. If we send a message that you can commit mass murder and then negotiate your way out of it, which was the case of, let's say, Charles Taylor in Liberia, then we have to look at the long-term cost, even if there's a short-term cost. But the problem is that there's no indication that this regime, given incentives, is going to surrender power. If I ever saw such an indication that they would be allowed to enjoy sort of an amnesty and then they would say, okay, fine, we will release power, we will stop torturing, we will stop raping, I would be very happy for any evidence that that would be the case. But in the broader sense, as I said, for the thousands of people who may have been involved in torture in the prisons, one may have to have a different model, something like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which gave not an unconditional amnesty, which I don't think is ever good, but it gave a conditional amnesty, conditioned on a confession, conditioned on admitting to one's wrongdoing. And I think that that is the least that the victims deserve. And it is a nice compromise between a sort of forgiveness while also having a certain measure of accountability.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Oh, okay.
Payam, this is sort of touched on by the last few questions. Well, if we do have a list of, well, if we're going to put sanctions on the key players in the regime, I guess I'm directing my question at you. Do you have a list of people, and are they going to be like, we know the black market is obviously has a crossover with the insiders in the regime. If you have that list and it comes out, and what kind of pushback do you expect? And I know this would probably be bigger than sanctions on the nuclear side, because people would have to be named.
Well, maybe Renee has something to say about this as well. Obviously, part of the work of the Documentation Center is to begin to identify individuals. And the traditional human rights report focused on the victims. We're trying to focus also on the perpetrators, and that's a big part of deterring through naming and shaming and identify those responsible. You see, I think the UN has the means of, look at the list of groups linked with international terrorism, for example, or lists of names and individuals linked with the nuclear program. It's possible to have a commission of inquiry that can determine which companies, for example, are under the control of the Revolutionary Guards or the Basij, which individuals have been involved in human rights abuses. The mechanisms are not the problem. It's the political will. It's the fact that human rights is not taken seriously. It's seen as an issue which is on the margins of power. And when politicians speak about political realism, we have to be realistic. Most often that means that we have to look at power through a very limited prism. And if we have learned anything from the experience of recent months in Iran, is that soft power cannot be underestimated. The power of people demanding human rights and justice and coming out in the streets in the millions, the power of exposing human rights abuses and delegitimizing a regime in the long run is far more effective than those who were advocating, I don't know, bombing Iran or all sorts of sort of violent responses to what is really happening. So it's not even at the level of, let's say, specific economic sanctions against specific companies, but it's at the level of the power of political symbols, the power of gestures of support, which encourage people who are besieged by the regime that there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I'd just like to add to his answer, if I may. In answer to your question, is there a list? We started a list in our reports. This report does name names. In fact, there's a chart in the back that it's not news to Iranians, I'm sure, but there's a chart of power structure in Iran. We also, in a report that we did just before this one, which was on the 1988 massacre, listed perpetrators. So yes, there are lists, and we hope that we'll be able to continue to compile them. Okay. Well, if there's nothing further, I think we'll say goodbye. Thank you very much for coming. It's been very stimulating, interesting conversation for us to talk about what we do with all of this documentation that we collect. Please help yourself to refreshments before you leave, and we're here for conversations. And thank you once again very much to Shadi Sadr and Dr. Payam Akhavan. I will see you in Geneva. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Thank you.